Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Legends of the Jedi. I had planned to release this episode sooner, but then I heard they were announcing a Tales of the Jedi animated series at Star Wars Celebration this year, so I waited in order to include some news about it in this podcast. I was hopeful they would begin adapting some of the material we've been talking about in the podcast because the promos use the exact same logo as the Tales of the Jedi comics we've been talking about. Unfortunately for fans of this era, the new show will be focusing on prequel Jedi like Ahsoka and Count Dooku. A bit of a bait and switch there by Disney, but it also shows that they're still aware of the series, and I'm hopeful we'll see Disney canon delve further into the Old Republic era in the years to come. So this episode is significant because by the time it drops, we will have celebrated the 1-year anniversary of the podcast. The episode marks the halfway point for all the content I had planned out. Today we'll be finishing off the Sith War storyline. After that, we have one more story arc in the Tales of the Jedi. Once we wrap up the Tales, there will be a couple bridging episodes, and then it's on to the Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2. In the words of Red Leader, almost there. So, recap time. In our last episode, we had some very significant events take place. Sith Lord Exar Kun crashed the trial of Ulic Qel-Droma and freed his partner in crime. He also took the opportunity to make a mockery of the Republic and the Jedi. Kun was confronted on the Senate floor by his old Jedi Master, Vodo. After a furious lightsaber battle, Kun killed his former master and departed with Ulic. At the same time, Kun dispatched his Sith-possessed disciples on a mission to destroy their own masters. Across the galaxy, these Sith acolytes slaughtered great Jedi Masters. Luckily for Master Thawne, Nomi and Silvar were around to foil an assassination attempt carried out by two former Jedi, Osweiler and Credo. After reporting his failure to Ulic, Credo was then sent by Exar Kun with Alima to destroy the Complex 9 space station. Boarding the ancient Sith ship of Nagasato, they completed their mission and managed to draw a fleet of ships led by the Jedi into a trap. They used the technology on Sato's ship to blow up a nearby star, resulting in the death of the Jedi Dace Diath, Kurl Tok, and Shoaneb Kulu. But Alima and Credo had also been deceived. Kun basically sent them on a suicide mission. He knew that the destruction of one star in the cluster would set off a series of supernovas. Unable to escape the blast radius, Alima, Credo, and Sato's ship were completely incinerated. And now, the shockwave of multiple supernovas churns across space like a tidal wave of doom at the speed of light, heading directly for the Jedi Archive world of Ossus. So with that recap, jump into your T-16 Skyhoppers and join me as we fly straight into Issue 5 of the Sith War entitled Brother Against Brother. The issue opens in on the Ossus system. As the Jedi carry out a planetary evacuation, Ulic and Exar Kun fly towards the planet. They're eager to steal the lost treasures guarded by the Jedi for generations. Kun explains that Mandalore and a number of his warriors have been dispatched to capture the citadel of Aziz on the planet Onderon. Here we have a contrast of the two Sith Lords. Whereas Ulic is troubled by thoughts of his former lover Alima, Exar Kun spares no thought at all to his former comrade Credo. Ulic dispels these thoughts and focuses on the task at hand. He dispatches a contingent of Mandalorian warriors to wreak havoc on Ossus. At this point, we flash through the evacuation efforts on the planet below. Thousands of years of Jedi history must be packed and rescued in only a few hours. There is no time to sort or sift through the most precious items. The Jedi grab as much as they can carry with them. Ancient scrolls and tomes are quickly stuffed into bags and boxes. Before long, chaos begins to take its toll. These hopeless preparations have a devastating effect on the Jedi who bear witness to the evacuation efforts. In one panel we see Nomi Sunrider, her daughter Vima, Master Thawne, Tot Donita, and Kay Qel-Droma. The Jedi are discussing the hopelessness of the evacuation efforts. Tot reminds Kay that they're doing all that they can, and as brash as ever, Kay tells him that they've got to find a way to do more. Nomi warns Thawne that they better get to one of the transport ships soon. At that moment, Kay raises his metal arm to the sky. If you remember, his arm was cut off in, I think, episode 6 of the podcast. Anyway, he raises his metal arm to the sky, and he points to one of the ships. Look, that ship. Can you feel it? It's Ulic. I can sense him. He came back to us. Nomi looks over and says, Ulic, I can't believe it. Kay goes running off towards his ship, the Nebulon Ranger. In no time at all, he launches it and pursues Ulic in the skies. Sensing his younger brother, Ulic sends a comm message telling Kay to stop meddling and back off. Kay is undeterred. He even fires a warning shot at Ulic, reminding him somewhat jokingly to watch his back. It becomes clear very quickly that Ulic doesn't have time for games. Not wanting to battle his brother outright, he attempts to evade the other ship. Kay won't let up so easily. He intends to bring his brother home for good. He starts making targeted surgical strikes on Ulic's engines. Over the comm channel, he begs his brother to at least talk to him. Ulic deftly maneuvers out of the way and swings his ship around. He begins to fire on Kay's ship. At the same time, one of the Mandalorian warriors swoops down with his war mount and also targets the Nebulon Ranger. With the combined firepower of both enemy ships, Kay begins to lose control and his ship starts plummeting towards the planet below. As the battle in the skies rages on, Exar Kun lands his ship, Starstorm 1, on Ossus. Like an emperor claiming a conquered land, Kun emerges and starts scanning the area for treasured artifacts. He's flanked on both sides by a contingent of Massassi warriors. "Can you smell the history of power here? Alas, we have so little time to take it all for ourselves." Inside a hidden private alcove of the Jedi archives, we see Jedi Master Ood Banar making preparations for the coming devastation. If you remember, Ood Banar kind of looks a bit like a tree person. His face is a collection of roots. Not exactly an ent. It might be easier if you just look for an image of him online, and you'll see what I mean. Here's what he says. "Much power on this planet, from many years of Jedi working, studying. Perhaps Ossus itself can protect these treasures inside my shielded vault. Ancient lightsabers, some of the first Jedi weapons ever created." As Ood Banar begins to stash these items in a secret vault beneath him, he senses a presence and turns around. "Ah, Exar Kun." "Master Ood Banar, thank you for saving those artifacts for us. I will make good use of them in the new Sith Golden Age." The Jedi Master takes one of the ancient lightsabers and activates it. "These lightsabers belong to the Jedi, and I will protect them with my life if I must." "A pity. Looks like I'll be chopping wood today." With that, Exar Kun activates his double-bladed blue saber and begins to spin it. Lightsabers clash as both combatants face off against one another, but before the battle can really get underway, one of the Massassi warriors takes an unexpected swing at the Jedi Master from behind, kind of like a sucker punch. Ood Banar falls to his knees. Knowing he can't defeat his enemy in battle, Master Ood must protect these artifacts in a different way. "Combat is not my skill, Exar Kun, but I can draw on sources of power you cannot imagine." Summoning power from the core of Ossus itself, waves of the Force begin to surge through the Jedi Master, and he begins to transform. The force of this transformation knocks Exar Kun off his feet. "These lightsabers are mine to protect, even if I must remain here for all time to do so." Master Ood basically grows into a giant tree, enveloping the hidden area in the ground that he used to hide his artifacts. Kun gets up slowly and looks on with disgust. He turns to his Massassi warriors, and this is what he says. "Foolish old Jedi Master. He'll be trapped here when the firestorm hits. It would have been better if he just surrendered those artifacts, but even without them, the victory of the Sith is assured. Come, the other Massassi have loaded Starstorm 1 with all they could find." Exar Kun makes his way back to his ship and surveys all the precious Jedi artifacts his servants have stolen, a veritable trove, consisting of more wealth and more knowledge than he could ever use. At that moment, his admiration is interrupted by a feral growl. "Exar Kun!" The Sith Lord turns around to see the Cathar Jedi Silvar standing a few feet away from him, holding an ignited lightsaber. "You have corrupted my mate Credo. You have slain Master Vodo. You have shattered the peace of our galaxy, and now you will die by my saber." With a bored flick of his wrist, Kun instructs his Massassi warriors to advance. "Go to her, finish this. We don't have any time to waste." Silvar begins to carve through the Massassi warriors with her blade, shouting after him. "Are you afraid, Exar Kun? These weaklings won't stop me." As even more Massassi advance, one of them lands a lucky blow and knocks Silvar out cold. Kun turns his back on the Jedi and beckons to his guards. "I have better things to do with my time. Back to Yavin 4. There we shall study the spoils of war. Kel Droma can take care of himself." With that, Exar Kun boards the Starstorm 1, and he departs the doomed planet. At this point, we flash back to Tot Donita, who is holding onto a bunch of scrolls and books. Or I should say barely holding on, because he has a ton in his hands. We're told that the emergency efforts of the Jedi can barely scratch the surface of the knowledge entombed on Ossus. Given an entire year, they likely couldn't have salvaged enough. Anything not taken will likely be lost forever. Republic troops begin going door to door making a last call for evacuations. In the skies above, scavengers and Mandalorian warriors begin firing on evacuation ships trying to flee the planet. Tot Danita and Nomi look up to see one of the ships in the area plummeting towards the ground below. When they realize it's Kay's ship, they set off after it. Luckily for Kay, with a bit of skill and the power of the Force, he is able to avert total disaster. His ship crash lands, but it's a crash he gets to walk away from. The Nebulon Ranger is not so lucky. I'm sad to say it's been totaled. Reflecting on this moment, it really is the case that Star Wars ships take on a life and character of their own, and this particular ship will be missed. Removing himself from the wreckage, Kay finds his brother standing in front of him a short distance away. Ulic's lightsaber is already ignited, and he calls out to Kay.
"So, brother, you landed safely. Don't force me to hurt you any further."
Kay gets closer, and he sees blood dripping from a wound in his brother's chest. "Ulic, you've been injured, you're bleeding."
"It's an old wound, a Sith wound, and there's nothing you can do about it."
Kay pulls out his lightsaber and he ignites it. "Ulic, I don't want to do this, but I have to save you from yourself, from the dark side." With tears in his eyes, he locks blades with his brother Ulic. "The Sith poison, Ulic. You're not thinking clearly. Drive back the dark side. Control your anger over Master Arca's death, Ulic. That's what drove you to seek revenge. That's what opened the doorway to the evil in your mind. There was nothing you could have done to help him. He died to protect you. Don't destroy his sacrifice." Ulic pushes back.
"No, I will make you be silent."
And for the third time in the series, Kay's left arm, his metal arm, is severed when Ulic's blade slices through it. It also happens to be his lightsaber arm. Looking up at his brother, Kay makes a last desperate plea. "Ulic, I love you. That's why I'm doing this." Ulic responds, looking down at him.
"Then you should have just left me alone."
And with that last outburst of rage, Ulic swings again, striking his brother down with his lightsaber. At that point, Nomi and Tot arrive on the scene to see Ulic murder his defenseless brother in cold blood. Ulic drops his lightsaber to the ground. As the tears stream from his eyes, he begins to sink to his knees in shock and horror. Holding his dead brother's body in his arms, he says,
"Kay, brother, what have I done? Kay, no. Kay, speak to me, Kay."
And this is how the issue ends, with a tragic picture of a man consumed by so much rage, he would strike down his own brother. How do you ever come back from that? It's the Cain and Abel story all over again. Ulic is damned. As the casualties continue to mount, we are heading into the last issue of the Sith War, but before that, we have the Jedi Journal's letters column. One particular letter is worth noting. Mr. James E. Holt of Detroit, Michigan writes that if the tales were ever made into a movie, Val Kilmer could portray Ulic, Sharon Stone could be Nomi, Sean Connery could be Master Arca, Brad Pitt could play Exar Kun, and Dace Diath could be played by Avery Brooks. You have to remember this letter was probably written sometime in 1994 or 1995, so imagine those actors as they look back then. It's kind of interesting to note that a few of the letters talk about Ulic's resemblance to a young Val Kilmer on the cover art, so this isn't the first time I'm hearing about this. With those images in your head, let's take a deep breath and march on to issue 6 titled Dark Lord. The issue opens with Nomi Sunrider standing over Ulic. Her hair is wildly whipping in every direction and her face is covered in tears. Seeing her friend killed by the man she once loved has devastated her. "Ulic, you are forever cursed for what you have done. See what has come of your own pride and your appetite for revenge. You brought this upon yourself. The Jedi Masters were right, Ulic. You must face the consequences of what you have begun." Nomi begins to draw on the Force. At her side, Tot Danita tries to calm her down. He tells her there's been enough violence. She ignores him. "Ulic, I loved you, but this, I imprison you in a wall of light. A fortress to block you from the Force. Blind you to your Jedi powers." She points her hand at him and sends out a shockwave of Force energy. Ulic begs for her to stop, but to no avail. Tot Danita grabs Nomi, and he asks what she's done to him. She explains that it's something that Master Odan taught her, a force-blocking technique to neutralize the enemy without violence. But she never thought it would be so complete, and now she has no idea how to undo what she has done. Ulic looks at his hands in anguish.
I'm blind to the Force. I can no longer feel it.
Well, with that, we switch locations at this point to Onderon. Mandalore is preparing his warriors for an all-out assault.
We have reached Onderon, the former home of the Dark Jedi Freedon Nad. We will conquer this place for our Lord Ulic Qel-Droma.
At the royal palace of Aziz, the capital city of Onderon, Oron Kira and Queen Gallia look into the sky and see the approach of the Mandalorian warriors. Luckily for Oron Kira, his warriors are ready at all times. He sounds the alarms and summons the Beast Riders to take to the skies.
Beast Riders ho! We must defend our city against the invaders.
As the Mandalorians approach the Beast Riders on their own winged mounts, Mandalore calls out to the defenders of Onderon.
City of Aziz, we demand your immediate surrender.
You may not find us such easy targets, invader,
Oron Kira calls back. As the two opposing forces engage in battle, Oron Kira is told by one of his men that reinforcements have been summoned from the Republic. They just need to hold out until these reinforcements arrive. Surprisingly, the primitive technology of the Beast Riders proves equal to the mechanical might of the Mandalorian war mounts. How's that for alliteration?
We have dealt with vermin from the skies before, and you're no different than the monsters from the Duxan moon.
Oh, we are different, very different, for we shall conquer.
Back on Ossus, Master Thrawn arrives at the scene. Nomi explains to him that she was so enraged, so horrified that she lost control. She couldn't stop herself and used her powers to strip Ulic of the Force. Ulic is still on the ground weeping. At this point he's lost everything. Master Arca, his brother, Nomi's love, and now his powers. He has nothing left. A recovered and rehabilitated Osweiler puts his hand on Ulic's shoulder. He tells him that he understands the devastation and the feelings of guilt, but they must stop Exar Kun at all costs. It is their duty as Jedi. Ulic stands up, and he looks at the assembled Jedi.
I know where to find him, and I can take you there. To Yavin 4.
Taut Danita tells the others that they will rally all the Jedi in a final assault against their enemy. Master Thrawn also says that the Jedi need to get to the evacuation ships immediately. He'll be right behind them, but he wants to say goodbye to an old friend first. In the next panel, Thrawn confronts Master Ood Banar, who has metamorphosized into a giant tree. Thrawn tells him that he can't question what Ood has done, but he is sad to lose him in this way. This is what Ood says.
Do not grieve for me, Thrawn. This is my metamorphosis, my life cycle. I have shielded my treasures. I have defeated Exar Kun. I am satisfied, and perhaps, my friend, Ossus will protect me enough. May the Force be with you.
The last panels of this page show the Jedi departing on their ships. We can see Ulic carrying his brother's body onto one of the ships. Eventually, once all the ships are safely away, the shockwave strikes the planet. The explosion of 10 suns sears the face of Ossus, like a galactic funeral pyre. For those wondering, this is not the end of Master Ood Banar's legacy. Thousands of years later, after Return of the Jedi takes place, Luke Skywalker will rediscover Ossus and Master Ood's hidden stash in his efforts to re-establish the Jedi Order. All is not lost. In space, the signal is given to all the Jedi ships. They are to converge on Yavin 4 to finally put an end to the scourge of the Sith. Back on Onderon, the fierce sky battle continues between the Beast Riders and the Mandalorians. Suddenly, Republic ships led by Captain Vanicus arrive at the planet to provide reinforcements. The Republic calls for the surrender of the Mandalorian warriors. It's announced through the skies that Ulic Qel-Droma has been defeated, and their cause is lost. Mandalore refuses to give up.
Surrender is betrayal. We fight, we conquer, or we die.
The tides of battle begin to turn. Though the Mandalorian warriors fight ruthlessly, the Republic fighters and the Beast Riders heavily outgun them. Seeing his forces get decimated, Mandalore knows that there's only one chance for survival. He orders the remaining forces to fall back to Duxan, the moon of Onderon. There, they can elude pursuit in the wild jungles. If you remember from episode 6 of the podcast, every so often Duxan will pass so close to Onderon that the two share an atmosphere for a time, while now the Mandalorians plan to use the linked atmosphere as a bridge to the moon. The Republic pursues the fleeing Mandalorians, but some of them, including Mandalore, manage to escape to the moon. On Duxan, we see Mandalore by himself, stalking through the jungle. Rain is pouring down and probably obscuring his vision. Suddenly, he hears a sound and finds himself surrounded by several of the beasts that live on the moon. Things are not looking so good for him right now. Meanwhile, the combined forces of the Jedi arrive in the Yavin system. Thousands upon thousands of Force wielders, probably the entire Jedi Order, converges upon the small jungle moon. Ulic sends a comm message to his defeated ally.
Exar Kun, the Jedi Knights of the Republic are united against you.
Master Thawne pipes up and tells Kun over the comm channel that his dream of a Sith Golden Age is but a nightmare, from which they all must awaken. On Yavin 4, Exar Kun watches from atop the great temple his Massassi have built for him. He begins to talk to himself. Ulic, you have betrayed me. Even I cannot fight the combined power of the Jedi. However, with the Sith knowledge I have acquired, I can fight in other ways. I will survive. He instructs a particularly beefy Massassi warrior to go to the isolation chambers in the pits beneath the temples. If his plans fail, he wants there to be one last surprise for the Jedi. But perhaps I won't fail. The Sith secrets will open doorways I don't necessarily understand. But I will use the power anyways. The whole doorways he doesn't understand thing is kind of reminiscent of Palpatine's famous quote that the dark side is a pathway to many abilities that some would consider to be unnatural. Anyway, Kun instructs his Massassi priest to summon all of the Massassi. He is in need of their strength. Though they know that their lives are probably forfeit, the Massassi dutifully stream in from the jungles and their temples. They come to serve their Dark Lord in his time of greatest need. Kun chains himself to an obelisk in the middle of the great temple and begins to draw on the dark side. Drained from thousands of Massassi sacrifices, the ritual has begun and his power begins to rise. Even as the Jedi approach, Exar Kun prepares himself to unleash his powerful spirit. He intends to shed the chains of his mortal body and run rampant throughout the cosmos. I shall be immortal. My spirit will live forever. Forever! A large explosion emanates outwards as Exar Kun is consumed by the vast energies he summoned. In the skies above Yavin 4, the wall of light generated by thousands of Jedi becomes a crushing blow made by the light side of the Force. It is a flood that sweeps down to extinguish the corruption of the Sith on the moon below. The awesome power of the Jedi triggers an unintended, terrible destruction in its wake. The Jedi begin to realize something is wrong on the moon below. Everything begins bursting into flames as the conflagration sweeps across the jungle with frightening speed. We're told that nothing can survive. Nomi says, "Look, we've defeated Exar Kun, but at what cost?" She looks to Ulic, who looks back at her with profound sadness and regret on his face. As the unstoppable flames continue to spread across the jungle moon, the Jedi ships depart. The Jedi Order has their work cut out for them. They must begin restoring the galaxy and rebuilding the Republic now that the Sith threat has been vanquished. On the beast moon of Duxon, the surviving Mandalorian warriors search the primeval jungles for their lost leader. One of the warriors comes across the fallen mask of Mandalore. He knows that their leader is no more, but he also knows that their tradition must continue. Donning the mask, he tells the others,
Now I am the new Mandalore.
Okay, time jump. Are you ready for this? Here we come. 2 years later, we see a solitary ship approach the charred plains of Yavin 4. While the great Massassi temples still stand, the forest has been razed to the ground. After finishing a pilgrimage to the gravesite of his brother, a lone former Jedi continues his long and fruitless search. He sends a comm message to the moon below.
This is Ulic Qel-Droma. Can anybody receive this? Are there any survivors down there?
Ulic lands his ship, which we learn is called Kay's Dream.
I can't stop myself. I have to see what happened. Exar Kun, what have you done?
Ulic surveys the devastation around him.
I've searched the galaxy for some way that I might become a Jedi again, that I might somehow be forgiven and even earn back my powers. But I am blind and deaf to the Force. I can sense nothing here, other than the sadness and destruction that I see all around me.
Still searching, still lost, Ulic Qel-Droma walks away. There's nothing for him in this place. In the utter darkness, there is a voice. It is a voice that comes long after Ulic has departed, and one that he would not have heard anyway, since he can no longer use the Force. Ulic, I can feel you out there. It's dark. I'm trapped, Ulic. I survived, but I'm trapped. Ulic, why don't you answer me? Don't leave me. Ulic. 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 And with that, our penultimate tale story arc comes to a close. Exar Kun has achieved immortality, after a fashion, but he finds himself trapped in some sort of netherrealm, and he has no way out. While our Jedi friends won the war, It feels like a Pyrrhic victory. Ulic is a broken man. His brother is dead, and he is alone. The Great Sith War is over, but as Nomi said, it came with a cost. It's like Yoda said,
"Wars not make one great."
For those of you wondering, this is not the end of Exar Kun. He comes back 4,000 years later in Kevin J. Anderson's Jedi Academy trilogy of novels. In the Legends continuity, Luke Skywalker establishes his Jedi Academy on Yavin 4 about 7 years after Return of the Jedi. Well, it just so happens to be a moon inhabited by a long dead, or I guess not dead, Sith Lord looking for impressionable young Jedi to corrupt. If that's something that sounds interesting to you, then I encourage you to check out those novels. So, the Great Sith War, perhaps more than any event we've seen to date, paves the way and sets the stage for Knights of the Old Republic. It's something I'll get into a bit more in subsequent episodes. For now, suffice it to say that we're almost done with the Tales of the Jedi. But there is one final tale to tell, a more personal story to be sure, but a welcome one. If you're wondering whether Ulic's story ends here, wonder no further. We shall see him one last time in our final tale story arc. It's called Redemption, but will Ulic actually find redemption? Will he regain his Jedi powers? Or will redemption take on another meaning altogether? Join me next time to find out. And in the immortal words of Han Solo,
Now let's blow this thing and go home.